Today's episode is sponsored by Skillshare. More on them a little later. Today we're going to talk about a LARP where we almost died.
Of fun!
And tornadoes.
That too.
Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do
just about everything.
So, we just, almost literally just got back from Reckoning LARP. If you want to see the other iterations where we talked about it, you can see it right here.
Why do you always put it on my face?
It's the best place for it. Reckoning LARP is sort of like a medieval fantasy LARP in which there are all these different cultures that are in kind of a war against each other, or they just came out of a 10-year war, and they're trying to figure out how to live together, kind of.
If you've seen the last couple of videos on Reckoning, there's a bit of a difference for this game, which is new ownership came and took control of it. So a lot of things changed.
Yeah,
Most importantly, we are now NPCs.
Staff adjacent.
Staff adjacent, in charge of the fun, but not the responsibility.
Which honestly, I think was a good call on their part because we shouldn't be charged with responsibility. No. It's a bad idea. That said, I don't want you to think this won't color our review to this because we aren't staff. We have no ownership with it. So we're just going to tell you what our general experiences were. And I mean, in talking to the community, a lot of them had very similar experiences, but obviously it's a LARP. You're all doing different stuff. So mileage may vary on experiences, but we'll talk about what we saw.
Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind. Our experience was a bit different this time because we were more involved with staff in the running of the game and trying to provide game rather than just being thrown into it and trying to make our own game. We weren't players. So there could be things that we missed, things that we saw the different side of it, and feel free to leave in the comments if you were at Reckoning and you're like, that is not at all my experience, you fools, you hooligans.
No, we'd like to hear kind of so everybody can see what it's like. It's been really cool to be on this side of it here and having all these episodes tracing back to this is what the first game was like. This is how different the second game. And now again, the third game is a totally different iteration. And I really want to get into how.
Also, I like the trilogy of Reckoning where it's our first LARP, and then the middle LARP where we're starting to help run game. Now we're staff adjacent. What happens next?
Ooh.
What comes next here? I think we had maybe 3 major negatives with the game, kind of going in stacks of how much they actually affected things.
Yeah, I think the first one, because it's the one that hits you in the face when we first got there, it was the weather. The weather this weekend was wild.
So there's always, whenever you get used to going to LARP, there are a few things that LARPers pray to the LARP gods don't happen at a LARP, which is blazing sun, horrendous rain, just bad weather in those 2 categories. So we showed up to all of them.
All of it. You just tick all the boxes.
Tick all the boxes.
Yeah.
We went for, it was super hot and super rainy by the time that before we even got there, to the point that the LARP was being set up in Muckening.
Yeah, it was, what would you call it?
The Muckening.
Which at this point, our community is starting to blame us for this thing because
every LARP we go to nowadays is just Muckening.
It's all, every LARP we go to is bad weather. The Conquest, they were this is the first time this ever happened, and we've got mud up to our knees. It was rough time.
But yeah, we got there, and it had rained enough that they were having to pull in just everyone to get the most basic stuff up.
Truckloads of gravel were coming in. It was rough. That was super, super hard. And then it would vacillate between just being
blazingly hot,
oppressively hot, dangerously hot,
to immediately horrendous storms.
Yeah, super downpours, lightning, crazy weather, man.
Speaking of crazy weather, so Reckoning did have to end early. We only got about 1.5 to 2 days of actual gameplay in, and that is because of the weather. During the time that we were playing, there was a really bad couple of cells of storms going through, to the point that it wrecked the surrounding area as well.
Yeah, I want to share that story at the end because it is an epic friggin' story.
It involves tornadoes, though.
Yeah, it involves tornadoes.
So the second major problem with the LARP was kind of another one that is hard to control when you're running the game, which is the event space.
Yes, and my understanding is it was sold kind of as being one thing. A lot of the things, the gravel, for example,
was supposed to be there.
Was supposed to already be there. There was a bunch of little things that were supposed to be in place. So that's not really within the control of the game itself. It is what it is. But the worst part about the place
was the hills.
Hot damn those hills.
You know those hills that you see from a distance and you're like, that looks attainable? And then you're halfway up the hill and you're like, I want to die.
Yeah.
That was this event space.
That plus the heat. And I felt so bad because, like,
and the mud.
On the worst 2 hills were, like, the Rivlin camp was on one and the Hadrian camp was on the other. And for those soldiers of players that were just going back and forth up and down those hills in either the blazing heat or the torrential downpours.
Literal rivers coming down the hill.
To you, you're just, if this was your first LARP or if you're fairly new to LARP, you played on hard mode. You're officially a veteran.
So yeah, I want to touch on that a little bit more. But first I want to talk about like the camp placements. Like you mentioned, each of the camps to be far enough away from each other and to not be on a part that they would have been washed away. They either had to be on the top of hills, which was hell to climb, or they had to be at the bottom where it flattened out, which is where all the water gathered and it became a swamp.
Right.
So like the Vatican, I don't know how much the Suzak Mar had to deal with the swamp, but the Vatican were in a swamp from the very beginning. Yeah. The Rivlins and Hadrians were like at the top of these like horrendous to climb hills. So like the players had it rough when it came to getting to the different camps. And the only kind of flat area that was like okay to get to was where like the bazaar and like the like dining area and other staff area where we got to put our tent.
Yeah.
So this is actually a conversation that I had with a few people there who were, it was their first LARP. I'm like, this was, like you said, the worst kind of it gets when it comes to the environment of LARPing, where it's like mud, it's super hot, it's like humid all the time, everything's far away on hills. And I talked to a bunch of people and I'm like, you will appreciate this come your next LARP, because it's like getting hit with all the different lessons that you don't have to learn over time all at once. Learning all the different things of what makes a tent comfortable, what makes you comfortable throughout the game, how much like stuff you should have on your person, what you should have because you don't want to go up the hill to get your stuff again. Like you learn all those things typically over the course of a bunch of games. Like we're just getting to the point where these players now are immediately.
Yeah, like we planned for a lot of this, so we were actually not that bad because we were just like, okay, well if it rains or if it's like this, let's have these.
Because we went to the Conquest.
We went to Conquest, yeah, we planned ahead of that. Our boots were super waterproof, like we were ready for that junk. So the rain wasn't that bad for us, it was just like an inconvenience more than anything else. Is there anything else that you thought was a little bit like unsteady with this one?
With the like overall problems with the Reckoning in general or the event space?
Either or.
So the third and final kind of issue that we noticed with the game, and it was probably the least effect on the game, was that the story was a little bit scattered.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is completely understandable once you get to the point where you realize how much the staff was doing to keep everything logistically together in the perfect storm of everything going wrong that they couldn't control. So there were a lot of the story NPCs got pulled into having to do a lot of like staff logistic work, which left a lot of storylines and stuff a little bit loose or hard to get to, and also spread amongst the hills. So people had to like go all different places for them. But obviously we weren't players this time, so we don't have a completely clear idea of how the story was projected to the players, but from our own personal perspective, it seemed a little bit scattered.
Yeah, for sure. And there were definitely those moments where it was like those lulls where I wasn't sure like what was going down or what people were up to, though to your point, like we were kind of camped out in a certain place, so we might just not have seen certain aspects. But that said, and I think from there we can kind of transition into the positives. The staff. So the reason why that all happened, as she touched on, was the fact that the staff was handling problems.
Yeah, so like we started with the negatives because I feel like they reflect really positively on the staff.
100%.
Which is like every single negative was something of like either something they couldn't control or was an after effect of them prioritizing much more important stuff. Right. So the staff ate this game for breakfast 100%. With how much they handled everything that went wrong. The rain from before the game started turned it into a muck yard, to the point that like 4-wheel drive cars were getting stuck easily. We got to the point that you could only park around like 20 cars at a time. Yeah, because all the rest were just getting stuck, and then they'd have to push them out or get like a truck to help pull them out. Like it was rough. So they had to completely change their plan and find another place to park. Like how many players were there? 200. Like 200 players' cars, right? So they had to call like the local government,
find places like in the town nearby, make a shuttle service so then once people have parked, they can shuttle them back and forth as needed.
And they went and got gravel to put down. Truckloads of gravel.
Yeah.
The giant gravel truck got stuck once, and they managed that too. Within the course of half a day, they completely added infrastructure to this place. It was genuinely
100%.
super impressive,
Yep.
especially considering that this is their first time running this game. I'm not sure how much like experience that staff has running games and like running it themselves, not necessarily volunteering at games. So it was extremely impressive how quickly everything came together and how well thought out and planned everything was.
Yeah, and how much they just generally like cared for the people coming in. That alone, in fact, it was so impressive, and the LARPers there noticed it, that they actually like called them to the staff tent, and the players stood in front of the staff tent and thanked them for all the hard work they were doing to make it happen for them. So yeah, huge shout out to the staff. You guys did just an amazing job.
And speaking of the players kind of calling everything together, huge shout out like to the player base.
Oh yeah.
Because we know from experience that coming to a game that you've prepared for a long time, only for it to turn into like a mud apocalypse, and to like have that moment of like, oh no.
Yeah, I'm stuck here for the next few days. And
Yeah,
this
like
is gonna
all
be
these
fun.
things that you planned, and suddenly like it just doesn't seem feasible. The players held that morale together.
Absolutely.
And not only did they hold their own morale together, they held each other together.
Yeah, like when we were doing setup and it was just muck and it could have been miserable. But instead, people were like, they were laughing, they were playing, they were helping each other set up tents, we were giving each other crap. Like it turned into what could have been a miserable time, and the players themselves made it a really great time. It's one of those things that like the hard times bring us together. Like by the end of it, we're like, I will die for you. You are my very best friend.
I think the players that in the end had it the hardest were the Vatican and the Hadrians, because they were on opposite sides. And the Vatican was like, it was underwater from the start of the game. And the Hadrians were like, there was a big hill, and then there was another big hill, and that's where they were.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked up to their camp, I was like, why? Well, this is the last time. First and last time.
But even then, like those two groups of players, like they still, like the Hadrians still went on in full plate metal. The Vaticans, like, built a massive wooden bridge throughout their entire camp so that they could walk through it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Like the players really pulled through. And
Yeah.
I know there are those that, like, they had a lot of things planned for this game, and like we had a lot of
Yeah,
things
I'm sure
planned
it's
for
a
the game.
super letdown. You have an event that you prepare a lot for and you look forward to it, and then it doesn't turn out at all like you wanted to. I would definitely get you're not feeling great about that. But on the whole, everybody I talked to at the end was like, this was terrible. Like the heat was terrible, the rain was terrible, this scared me. I will definitely come back next year.
Yeah.
100%. Like we heard that a lot. So,
Yeah,
really
it's
cool.
very telling that so much went wrong so severely, and I still had a lot more fun than previous.
Yes,
than
100%.
previous events.
Yeah, which we should get into it. Let's get into our own personal experience.
Yeah.
I do want to start with, by the way, again, it was a 16-hour drive. and somewhere along that drive, like we had to stop and we picked up our friend Graham, who's our Discord like
Gremlin.
super mod, the bearded gremlin.
The bearded gremlin, the one that keeps us alive.
Which, by
keeps
the
us-
way, he was like one of our like within the first 100 subscribers,
Like,
first
first
10
10.
subscribers. Yeah.
And he's been around ever since.
Yeah, he's just been and to the point where he's like intrinsic to the things we do in the Discord and stuff. Like he's fantastic. So hey, Graham, thanks for being awesome. But our I have a little Honda Fit, my little car where we cram everything. So there was just enough room for just us and our stuff. And then we have a whole other much bigger than me man, taller, he's a big dude.
And his 2 suitcases.
And his 2 suitcases for like with clothing and armor for a
2
bigger
big
dude.
suitcases.
Yeah.
So originally, we were planning to stop at the event the day we got there and drop off all of our stuff and set up stuff. But that was the day that it had turned into like mud apocalypse, and they had yet to finish all the infrastructure, and we would have gotten there at like 8 p.m.
In the middle of an electrical storm too, and like our tent is like a big metal pole that holds up the middle of it. And I'm like, listen, I'm not setting up in a field with a big old metal pole in the middle of the rain. Like, we're going to change around. This is gonna work.
So instead, we stopped at our Airbnb, and I stayed there while you picked up Graham from the airport, and you came back, and then we all stood and stared at the car for a while and tried to figure out how we were gonna get there. Originally, we were gonna leave me at a Starbucks, and he was gonna come back and get me, but it's an hour and 45-minute drive, so it would have taken like 4 hours just for us to get there. So instead, he's like, nah, I got this.
So, this is what we did. Even in the car, she doesn't get a chair.
Why don't I get chairs? I'm on a yoga ball right now. He gets chairs.
She had to go through that.
We just got a new chair.
She had to go through that twice, by the way, because we also had to come back from that
Yeah,
walk.
it was smaller the second time because everything's so much less organized the second time. I was literally like a ball of a person.
She's dying. The second time was real funny, too, because she had this thing with a garbage bag next to her. I don't know if you knew it about yourself, but because you were leaned up in this hot little car where my AC didn't work,
it was
by the
dripping
way,
with sweat.
She was drenched all on this one side. I felt so bad. I was
And
very sorry.
I didn't have any place to put my feet, so I was literally sitting sideways with my feet against the door, on my hip, pushed up against a garbage bag.
And she's like cramping up. She's like, can we stop somewhere?
I can't feel my hip anymore. You're like, I don't know, can you make it like...
Yeah, can you make another 15 minutes? We're so close. It was an experience in that way.
What we go through.
Man, you'll never get a chair. But we get there, and like we said, Metapocalypse, setting up, like, everybody was great. We're helping each other set up, but I wanted to die. I was so miserable hot, and she can tell you, I'm miserable when I'm hot.
Yeah, he's a baby when it's hot outside.
I do not like it.
He gets all grumpy.
I do not like it, Sam, I am.
He gets all grumpy. He frowns all the time.
Yeah,
he scowls at people.
Yeah, no, it wasn't in a good place.
I kept offering him my booty shorts because he was wearing jeans.
Yeah, oh man, the jeans were a bad choice. They were very uncomfortable, and they made me chafe in awful places for the rest of that game.
But yeah, they eventually pushed the game back because originally it was supposed to start at 5 on the big day it started, but no one was ready.
Yeah, the weather was so bad that it just wasn't
So they pushed it back to the following day. So we had a bunch of extra time to set up. We spent that entire day. Someone handed me a cart and it said, this one's available, and I never let it go. So I spent the entire day going back and forth, getting from where the cars were to where our tent was and just dropping off stuff. And every second trip, someone's like, can you please help me? And I'm like, of course. And that leads me to an entirely different part of the camp. My favorite was I saw a girl with this big crate. Like, she's just standing at the bottom of the hill to the Rivlin camp with this big crate looking up. And I'm like, you need help. So we tried to carry it up, and that didn't work. So I went back and unloaded our cart, and we carted it up, and that barely worked.
Yeah, the mud was so thick, all the carts were getting stuck. Man, that was a day.
Like, the Rivlin hill got steeper the last 10 feet. Yeah. It's like a salt in the wounds kind of hill.
It is funny, like, you bring that up. It's like a video game where you just get pulled into all these side quests. Like, on the way to whatever you were doing, there's just somebody with a big exclamation mark above their head being like, please help me, please help me, I'm in the mud. And you're like, okay, here we go. And then that's another, like, half hour of what you're doing in the heat before you come back to finish what you were originally doing. Happened a lot. A lot.
But overall, like, it was fun.
It was part of the fun, yeah, for sure. Ooh, my mask dumped off. No, it was super part of the fun.
Watch out, it's gonna fall again.
It was super part of the fun. One of the fun parts for me, I was coming down the Rivlin Hill.
That's always the best part.
I had just gone up twice to go get something. I'm coming down, and I see a man, and he has 2 coolers and a dream. And he's dragging these coolers up the hill, just about to get towards the worst muddy part. And I look at him, I'm like, do you need help? He's like, no, I should get this. And I go, you need help. This is your first time up that hill, yeah? And he's like, yep. I'm like, yeah, no, you don't understand.
It's one of those hills that you look at it and you think it's going to be fine. And it's not.
So I grab one and we go up. And on the way up, it turns out like his son is actually a fan of the show. So hello. And he had made the Staff of the Wanderer, which was so cool to see. Here, if you don't know what the Staff of the Wanderer is, I love being out there to meet you all. So that was really, really neat. And to see everybody does my projects better after the fact. I'm like, damn, this came out so much better than mine.
Yeah, there was one person who did the Staff of the Wanderer where she put this big floof of like feathers, almost like a feather duster, but big.
Yeah.
And that turned into like a sunshade wherever she needed it.
So money. Oh my God, it couldn't have been better. Like she had the stick for the mud, and she had the sunshade for the sun.
It was
She
basically like a
ready.
medieval sun umbrella.
She was so ready. It was so good.
That was a lot of what the setup was. Whereas it's like almost, it was more comical than miserable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and again, everybody was getting along and having fun. We're helping each other set up tents. It wasn't going quite right because the mud wouldn't hold the stakes. So like, we'd get it all set up on one side, then people would pull on the other side, and all those stakes would pull back up, and we're like, oh, well, shit. Here we go again.
Here we go staking again.
Hey, sorry for the interruption, editing Kit here. So in this place, originally, we had a whole thing that we did about today's sponsor, Skillshare. But I'm gonna be honest with you, while I was supposed to be editing, I actually took a whole other class, and I really wanted to share it with you. Mostly because we get the question all the time, especially with like new LARPers, with how do you come up with a character? And Skillshare has given me my new favorite answer. The class I took was Master Method to Unlocking Story Effortlessly, Writing Characters with Muse by Jody Baker. In this class, she goes over her Muse framework for writing out characters that helps make them feel like real people with actual motivations, reasons why they are how they are. Really everything you kind of need to make your own character. And it's fun because it's ostensibly like for writing a character, but it works so perfectly for making your own LARP character. It's, again, 100% what I'm using from now on. Things like this is why I like having Skillshare as a sponsor. Both Maddie and I use it all the time, and we always find something really helpful. If you're new and don't know what Skillshare is, it is the largest online learning community for creatives with like thousands of classes led by industry experts, covering a super broad range of subjects like film, photography, editing, productivity, and a whole bunch more. If you're interested, Skillshare has a great deal for this community. The first 500 people to use my link in the description below will get 1 month free of Skillshare. That's a whole month free of learning about things that ignite your passion. Exactly what we're about on this channel. And not only is that good for you, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. All right, I'll let you get back to the story. I just really wanted to share that with you, and I thought it was cooler than what we had before.
Once we finally get everything settled and we start the game the next day. So I have an internal rule for LARP, which is the very first day you dress your best because you're setting expectations and this is what people will remember you. We decided, since we played Evelyn and Gareth, but this time because last game our culture
Basically kicked us out.
Kicked us out and said we were traitors and like said we weren't welcome in the camp and
Yeah.
all that. And we were like, fine.
Yeah, we don't need you anyway.
We don't need you.
Run away.
We became neutral parties, which was our excuse to become NPCs.
Right.
So we decided to go with our own little color scheme, which was he is the shadows and espionage person, and I'm the above board like politics and trade. So he dressed in all black. And I dressed in all white.
So all black leather armor in the baking sun.
All white dresses and such in the mud.
It couldn't have been worse decisions.
But we made it work.
For sure. Yeah, like
you weren't super hot.
No, I felt actually pretty. I don't know if it was like I passed the point where I would have been stroking the heat, and my body's just like, you're dead to me now. I give up. So I just didn't feel anything. I was numb inside.
If anything, like I really enjoyed the outfit that was made for me by a friend of mine, Linaway. So
it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. Yeah, if you're on the Reckoning server and you see Linaway, she makes stuff.
So good.
She does commissions, and it's so good.
Yeah, I'm definitely having her make some stuff for me.
But the thing she made for me, the underdress had like a corset lacing in the back, and the overdress had corset lacing in the front. And it was like having a back brace the entire time going up and down those hills. It was beautiful.
But and she did when she first stepped out, there's a little bit of like mud splash, but after she realized the rules,
I can't pick up my feet too far, else it'll fling mud toward the back of my skirts.
She managed to keep it pristinely white until
the staff tent did not get the same like mud treatment as everywhere else. Because,
they took care of the players, not themselves.
So the staff tent was a muddy apocalypse. And they also had those like logs down to try to like walk on top of the mud. But those logs got slippery with mud over time. So we were leaving the staff tent.
She ate it so like she was behind me, and I hear like almost like Foley work for a movie, the sound of body hitting floor. Like it was like boom.
So I stepped on the edge of a log. Not only was it slippery, but it came out of the ground where he was, because it was around the time he stepped off the log. I stepped onto it. The log went like that, and then I slipped off. And I I twisted my back. It was awful.
And her nice white dress was just plastered in mud.
Plastered in mud. Like, I stood up and I'm half mud. Luckily, one of the arbiters, which we'll talk about the arbiters later, she had like
a little washing kit, like a
washing
board
kit, like a washing board and detergent and stuff. And like kit, while I was cleaning myself, he went and washed like my overskirt and my overdress and stuff.
I got that thing clean.
It was perfection.
I was so good.
It was great. I didn't get to wear it again, but by the end of the game.
Yeah,
but
I was very proud of how good.
But like when we were packing, and I was like, "There's no mud on this."
Yeah, I did a good job.
I think halfway, I'm gonna give the credit to Lynn away though, because she chose pretty quality fabrics.
Yeah, for sure. What I think was beautiful.
That was beautiful. I think we should talk a little bit about setting the stage for the game when it comes to story-wise.
Yep.
Which is, we were all in-game called to this area because the arbiters, which are basically the in-game referees,
right.
They're the ones that you go to for rule disputes, for any questions.
They'd watch during combat and like call out things and stuff.
But in-game, they're like super magical wizard people that have been in seclusion up until there was the end results of last game where we did this big ritual, and ritual magic is a whole new level of powerful magic that the arbiters know how to do, but is super dangerous for everyone else to do. So that, along with the rising evil creating this crystal, which is basically pure crystallized evil, they're like, world's messed up enough, we're gonna come out of seclusion. And so they summoned all of the cultures to a specific area by burning the invitation into the door of every single building across the region.
Yeah, not threatening at all. It's like, yeah, sure, we'll go.
Ignore us if you dare. And then we get there and they're all just like super friendly and chill.
Yeah, really, really helpful. And we're like, hey, I kind of like these guys. I mean, I didn't like the invitation, but I kind of like these guys.
What kind of experience did you have before the game was ended early by tornadoes?
Yeah, so I'm very like she said, dressed to impress, very like stereotypical. I'm not above the board.
He made the set of armor that he wore on the channel, and you can see what he would look like. We didn't get a lot of footage of us wearing our stuff because of like the weather was awful and it ended early.
Yeah,
but
and you don't film at a LARP. Like you do a little before, or you do it some after, and both of those were just a hot mess. So.
Yeah, but yeah, he was stereotypical. You see him in a crowd, and you're like, that is the thief NPC.
Which was good because it drew people to me that wanted to do nefarious things, which is exactly what it was for, right? So yeah, no, I had a bunch of really great experiences of like sending people off to do stuff. I had this one person who very much wanted to live that. He wanted to be about that life, right? So he's like, yeah, what do I need to do? I'm like, well, you gotta earn this. You gotta earn my trust and stuff. I'm gonna send you on a job. So at this point, it bears mentioning that we have brought a bunch of props, a bunch of stuff, but because of how hard setup was and weather, nothing was ready on our side to do that.
Yeah,
so
we only had a few things that we were able to put out on the first day.
Yeah.
And then even by the second day, we're like maybe a third of the stuff we've brought is in play.
So I'm like, let me go do some reconnaissance and I'm going to give you a job and then I need you to complete that job as fast as possible. And he's like, okay. I immediately run to our tent, mucky boots. I grab
a random quest item,
a little skull, and I go over to, there's a player who's...
Yeah, they're the bazaar of merchants.
Yeah, and he screws everybody with price. Like, as you walk by, he's like, special price just for you. I'm like, listen. And he's cool with like adding game for people. I'm like, I need you to hold on to this, put it prominently on the table. I'm like, if anybody tries to buy it, screw them. Like as much money as you can like soak out of them. I'm like, but at the end, don't let them get it. I'm like, I'm trying to have somebody steal it. I'm like, but don't let them steal it either. Like, don't make this an easy thing. And he's like, got it. Puts it in the middle of the table where it's super visible, puts other stuff around it. So my boy, I go to him and I'm just like, listen, there's a super expensive item. It's over here. Like, you'll see it. This is what it looks like. I need you to take that for me. Not 15 minutes later, a homie walks up and he's like, got it. And I talked to the guy who he stole it from. And it was such a good lift. Like, the guy was in the sun and he had like an umbrella that he had to fix. So the
For
dude,
like 3 seconds, he stood up to adjust his umbrella.
He stood up, he goes like this, and he comes back down, and it's gone.
And so is the guy.
And so yeah, he's just like shoink, in passing, and grabbed the thing. It was like perfect little pickup. I was very, very impressed once I heard about it. He was impressed too. He was like, he got me good. Yeah, definitely. Which led to a whole bunch of little quests of like gathering some information and stuff. He was really, really good. It's funny, there was a point which I got a quest from somebody else because people not only came to me to get quests, but they also came to me to gather information. They want to learn things, and I was like a spy, an information gatherer. So someone came to me and was like, hey, one of the Hadrian like higher ups got stabbed in the marketplace. And they're like, I need to know who did it, and I need to know who sent them. And by the description other people gave, I thought it was that guy. But like the guy who's my little thief, my little partner in crime there. And so I'm like, okay, he's valuable to me. So how am I going to pin this on somebody else? So I started making all these plans to pin that onto somebody else and like get somebody else in trouble for it. But then like while I'm working, I get embroiled with that person was Voltaire, who's another person in the Rivulet, and he's kind of high up. And he pulled me aside. He's like, I may have use for your very specific skills. I'm like, do tell. And he's like, come with me. And of course, with him is walking up that damn hill. So I'm like, oh, this better be a good job.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. Do you really need me? I have somebody here who could help. But it was like this whole plot that they had ready to pit. I don't want to give anything away because he
basically
might
pit some other cultures against each other.
All the other cultures that were there, they had this super like detailed plan, and I had to like plant these documents onto somebody else after I witnessed them sign some like forward some other document. It was a whole thing, very well put together. So that was in the back burner the whole time. But then one of my favorite players, it was this dude who comes up to me and he wanted to be an assassin specifically, and there is an assassin guild within it, but they're super hard to find. Like to find them, you have to either say you're looking for this person's name, which was the Scorpion, and try to like weed out who that might be and find clues, or you say a random phrase, like a phrase to people, and if they answer you a certain way, you know that they're a contact that you can use to try to get into it. And then like they would meet at night and he'd get a mission or something like that. So I wouldn't have expected, because he was fairly like a quiet dude, right? And kind of comes up and he's like, oh, I kind of want this thing. So I gave him kind of the beginnings of the quest, and then I had like other things seated around to try to lead him in the right direction. He ended up finding the right person, became what he became. The best part about that, though, is aside from the fact that he just was really good at that, like turns out, just a little quiet killer.
It's the quiet ones.
There was a battle later on, though, and all these orcs, like we said, came out of the woods to fight. And it was epic. It was this huge battle. And I'm watching this big orc on a hill, and he's smashing into somebody else. And from behind him, because the dude was smaller, I didn't see him at first, he jumps up with these two blades. I just see him over the orc and stab into him. And the orc turns to try to swing. Homie ducks underneath him, hits him a bunch of times, like is dodging all of his strikes and hitting him. Downs an orc, like by himself, downs that orc. Another orc comes to start picking him up, and he like backpedals away.
And runs around the hill?
Not even, as that orc starts like trying to heal the other orc, he comes back and he starts hitting the one healing. He has to keep defending himself, and then other people came to handle that situation, and he just ghosted away. I was like, he just handled what takes like a group of people to handle usually, like easily. I was like, that kid is a badass. He had a moment. That was so cool to watch. I was like, oh.
We were just at the bottom of the hill watching the fight, and you were just like, my assassin boy!
Like, get him! They're yelling from the bottom of the hill, kill him! It was so good. No, yeah, kudos to you. That was awesome. That was one of my highlights, just seeing that happen.
Yeah, just watching. I think that was the majority of our highlights, was watching players that we had kind of directed in certain ways, then make what we had just seeded into badass, amazing things. Oh
yeah, absolutely incredible. The only other like moment I had in this one was my own like personal moment. I was walking down the street, and if you have a yellow or an orange bag, it's lootable. People can steal that or waylay you for it. So I had it fairly prominently on my belt. Totally forgot about it. I'm walking, I pass a group of Suzak Marhu on the street. Turns out they'd be ruffians who wanted to rob me. So they're like, hey, that's a heavy load you carry on your belt there. And like they gathered around me. There was like 4 or 5 of them. And I'm like, oh, I see what's happening here. So like player mode kicks in. I'm like, oh, do you mean this? And I pull out like my first sword. And they're like, whoa, careful, friend. And I'm like, oh, I am careful. It's quite sharp. And I have 2. And I pull out the second one. So like now they're all around me and they're grabbing their weapons. And I switch right into like, I'm the spy master though. I'm like, you all interest me. And I enjoy somebody who has this gumption to take what they need. I'm like, so you know what? You work for me now. I'm like, I have somebody who's going to be coming through here. I'm like, and I need you to take what's on them. And they're like, what's in it for us? I'm like, what's on them? I'm like, I don't care who has it. It's very valuable, and I don't want the people where it's going to have it. I'm like, split it amongst yourselves. I don't care. I'm like, but, and as I'm doing it though, I'm like walking around, I'm like touching them with my blade, like just trying to be as intimidating as I can be. I was totally out of my depth, making stuff up on the fly. I'm just like, we're gonna turn this into a game moment. So at the end, I start to walk away, and I'm like, wait. And I turn around, I take the orange thing off my pouch, and I throw it at him. I'm like, down payment. And I walk away, and I was like, that was the coolest shit ever. And then I ran to go make a quest for them, because I didn't have anybody coming. I went to somebody, I'm like, listen, at this particular time, I need you to walk down the street with this thing. People are gonna loot you. It's gonna happen. Like, and they're like, okay, I can make this happen. It was really fun. It was really, really fun. Yeah, thank you guys. You guys did a great job acting that out. You were thoroughly intimidating. Good job.
And you weren't the only one that was playing a kind of leader in the dark.
Yeah.
There was, like you said, there was an assassin like guild you could find. There was also a thieves guild.
Yeah. Oh, so the head of the Thieves Guild, I won't out them, but they do things where they'll invite people who are in that life, basically, to the Thieves Guild. And they gave me the cleanest handoff I've ever had in my life. It was the beginning of the game. I'm in my full armor. It's before I started anything. And this person walks and jostles into me. And their face is like mostly covered or whatever. But as they jostle into me, I feel paper touch my hand just enough. So like, you know that like monkey instinct of grab thing? Like it touched me just enough where I grabbed it. And I looked down just in time to see what was in my hand. I almost completely missed who did it. And I pocketed it immediately. And it was just the smoothest damn thing I've ever seen. I'm like, you are actually a thief, I'm pretty sure. I think you do things. You know who I'm talking to. I know your life. I know what it's like.
So later on, on my side, one of the quests that I had was I was going to send people to find that specific thief because my caravans were getting looted in the area, and I wanted to make a deal with them, figuring they would have like contacts. So like, hey, if you like, I'll make a special deal with you, either like pay tithes or I can help you smuggle stuff. Just let my caravans through. So we picked up a dynamic duo, which just so happened to be Grem and Riva or Reva.
I think it's Reva, yeah.
Reva, who turned into, I don't know what it is about our community and the people that we end up having. Like everything always turns into skullduggery.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
our conquest group, our reckoning group, like everything always is skullduggery. I don't know, like don't think that every LARP we go to is literally just thieves in the dark and spies and all that. That's just us.
I think we
it's
have
just
a
what
vibe.
we inspire in people apparently.
I'm not bad at it.
So they managed to find the base of operations of the Thieves Guild when they're not there and steal like this statue of that's like symbolizes the guild entire like
to find that though, first they solved a riddle. They had like an oracle who they asked kind of where it was or something like that.
Yeah.
Like one of the arbiters who can like tell the future or stuff. So they're like, look to the east where the smoke blows or something like that. And this particular area that it could be found was
then they had to find, they had already learned that it had to do something with the snake. So then they found they found a place that had an orange, which means lootable, snake statue.
Yeah.
And they were like...
And where the smoke blows, it was like in a hookah lounge, right? So it's like, to solve the little riddle though, they just were walking around like, oh, you know what it might be? And they go in there and there's a little statue of a snake.
So they steal it when no one's there.
Yeah. They come back and they're like, look what I got.
They're like, we don't know what to do with this, we just took it. So we send them back out to try to negotiate with, they're like, hey, we proved our stuff. We stole this from you, the Thieves Guild.
Which is exactly what they want to see. Like,
yeah.
They want to see that kind
it's
of
like, so
initiative.
they could arrange a meeting between me and the leader of the Thieves Guild to try to like negotiate that. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was really good. So some of these stories, they just kind of end because then like
the game ended.
Stuff happened. We'll get into that.
So meanwhile, while he's doing all of these, like, a lot of your stories end up with you just finding innocent people in the world and turning them into like thieves and assassins.
I literally walk up to, like, there are people who were reading, they had a board where, like
the quest board was
boards and stuff,
awesome.
which was awesome. But they'll be reading there and I'll be like, are you looking for a job? And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, it is muddy. I need somebody who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty. And they're like, oh, I might not mind that. I'm like, good. If you don't mind, come this way with me. And we'll just have a quick conversation. It's like, no, I need you to find something for me, and I need you to acquire it. I don't care how. Like, I'd imagine spending your own money is probably not a thing you want, so some other way, perhaps?
So, on my side of things, I wanted to create a sort of diplomatic or trade route style of gameplay because, like, we tend to be opposites. So, I wanted to establish, in the previous games, my character had established trade routes with the Vatican, the Hadrians, and, like, she was Rivlin, so she has trade routes there. The only one left was the Suzak Mar. So I started picking players and basically directing them to, like, find who's in charge in the Suzak Mar, negotiate on my behalf, come back with, like, when you potentially are close to the ends of dealings and you need me to help with that. As well as I started going to all the different cultures and finding people in them. And I was like, hey, don't you think that the March, which is the entire region, needs a better road system? Because right now, all we have are the rivers and then, like, really bad, like, dirt paths. And they're like, I can see the pros and cons of that because, like, we're all kind of tense with military stuff, so do we want easier access? But also, there's a lot of pros. So I go to each culture and I start, like, grabbing bits and pieces of people and, like, planting the idea and, like, saying, like, hey, if you can make this go anywhere, I'd be happy to, like, financially support your efforts. And I had a few people, one of which was he ended up being the second in command of the Rangers, which was a guild in the Rivlands. But, like, he took it and he ran with it.
Oh my god, yeah, that became, like, the game. Like, they made all these different pacts with people and they had, like, treaties and stuff.
Yeah, he went and he found people in the Vatican and the Suzak Mar, and they made all these different plans where the Rivlins and the Vatican were going to be responsible for, like, guarding the different maintaining the different sections of it. The Suzak Mar were going to, like, bankroll the entire thing, and the only thing they wanted was, like, that whatever deal they ended up making was separate from whatever deal the Hadrians had with their roads. Because I think the game had started with, like, that day was when they introduced the overworld game. So the overworld game is basically each culture gets to send representatives to a big map of the area. And there are, like, soldiers that you can move around and you can put money in to buy more soldiers. You can upgrade, like, fortresses and stuff. And what I heard was the very first, as soon as it started, the Hadrians sent, like, people to attack. Because I remember originally it was like, we can work out so that the Rivlin Hadrian tension, it's like, I can work out something that, like, the Hadrians can be involved. Because I was mostly working with the Rivlins for it. And then he comes back down to me later. He's like, we have a problem.
We're at war again.
He's like, so it turns out, I don't think we're gonna be able to, like, convince the Rivlins to build a road path from our territory to the Hadrian territory because they just attacked us. And I was like...
The overworld game was mint, though. It's like a giant game of Risk, almost, but you're able to use, like, your in-world money to buy troops and stuff. It's really fun. People had a lot of fun with that game.
So in the middle of all this, I'm sure if you've watched our previous videos, you know of him, which is the Prince.
The Suzak Mar Prince.
He's the merchant that, like, he's like, special price just for you. But he makes so much money by bringing legitimate objects in to sell for in-game currency that he has so much money that he went to the overworld game and just threw down a bunch of money and to drive game and get it started, attacked a random Vatican city. Little did apparently he know that specific Vatican city is their holy city, and they did not like that.
Not take well to that at all.
So that turned into a whole big war of the Rivlins were currently fighting off the Hadrians, but they split their forces to support the Vaticans to go fight this massive force he had just bought. And they managed to beat him back, and were just about to start rolling down into the Suzak lands as, like, retribution. And the rest of the Suzak Mar were like, no.
He doesn't represent us.
He doesn't represent us. There's a bunch of political and all this going on. Like, I just wanted to make some roads, man. But that's the kind of the gameplay that I was trying to inspire, was people talking to each other, having to negotiate in order to get a common goal, because it genuinely would benefit people. I was also working with, there was a few people that played either, like, historians or like a librarian or map makers, and I was working with them to try and, like, see if we could start libraries across the different culture. Toward the end of toward the end of the game, I had made, so I go overboard.
Just a little bit.
A little bit. Well, so let me mention, like, a few of the other things that I was working with before we move on to all of the stuff that I made that maybe didn't get fully implemented. So the main staff had put out like an encoded different language undead, like an undead missives to each other that people were like translating and trying to get bits enough of it together that they could put it together. And I really wanted it, like whatever the translation was. So I like the Rivlins had gathered enough of it, and I was going to people and I was like, just so you know, the Rivlins have all this, and they're not known for sharing information. So I'm willing to pay if I can get a copy of whatever translation they have, one way or another. Whether the original documents and then you guys figure out the translation, or just the translation when they're done. I just don't want it to be lost or like held when it could benefit everyone.
And it's kind of fun because I don't know, like a lot of times we end up kind of playing off of each other. So I'm sure you put that out in the world, because then somebody else came to me and they wanted to get their hands on it for a reason. They didn't tell me why, but they're like, I'm not sure I'll be able to get it because they weren't in a camp that would have been friendly with them. They're like, but I feel like you could probably get it for me if you know what I mean. I'm like, it'll cost you. They're like, we'll pay. And I'm like, okay.
So like everyone's trying to get these undead writings. And in the middle of this, we also put out, as part of a quest of ours, this piece of slate that we had engraved like an encoded message into the top of it and broken into 4 parts and hid one near each culture. I was sitting with the one with the least amount of writing, because that would have gone to the Vatican, but the Vatican didn't spend much time in their camp because it was a swamp. Right. And it had the least amount of writing. So I had it as an example, and someone walks up and they're like, I hear you can potentially direct me towards some like puzzles or things that can like challenge the mind.
Yeah, stimulate my brain.
And I showed him the stone, and I'm like, you know, I found this, and it seems to have been here before we got here. But it also seems to only be part of a larger whole. If you're interested, I could use someone looking for the rest of this. And he's like, it's not really my kind of puzzle. So he walks away. And then he finds one by accident, and now he's intrigued. So he comes back later and he's like, so I found another one, and now I might be a little intrigued. So I'm like, oh. And then we look it over, and he's like, it looks like Vatican writing. And I was like, it's very similar, but we are in the Iron Hills, so like we're in between Vatican and Rivlinland. I was like, but it looks older. It doesn't look like modern Vatican, and it doesn't look like maybe something that Vatican would entirely know about. You know, I could have sworn that like a chest that was found in the woods had some like a thing with the same similar signs. And he's like, you know, I think I remember someone in the Suzak mentioning that. So he takes both of them, and he has massive pants pockets. These are huge chunks of slate. He puts one in each pants pocket and walks away. And I like to think that he found the rest of them, or like that made good game for him. I didn't see him again.
Yeah.
So while the slate puzzle is going on, there's also the rituals. So after last game, and everyone had so much fun with the big ritual at the end, the staff wanted to implement rituals as a mechanic. So as a sort of in-between, because you could make up anything, and the arbiters would just decide like if you had done enough that the ritual succeeded. But I wanted to make a bunch of like pre-made rituals that could offer like a way for people to learn how and what was expected. So I made 45.
She goes a little overboard. Hold on, I want to take a moment. Put over your face your friggin' mind map of quests.
I'll just, it's like a
Look at this.
like a mind map of quests, my 6 different documents of quests and information, my 50-page document of in character written out like rituals.
She made straight up books. Like books.
Yeah. So I took 14 of those and I made them into like scrolls. And I tied them up with orange little ribbons so that people knew they were lootable. And I just walked around the world and just like
put them places.
I just put them places that I walked by. And we handed some to some NPCs. And then we just let the world run. And I had one with me that I was like, if you find these, I'm looking for them. Just to send people to look for them.
Yeah, they were stolen from the arbiters.
Yeah, there was like, we heard that the arbiters there was a theft last night. But it seems like the thief panicked and basically like lost the bag that had
stuff. Yeah,
got rid of the stuff so he wouldn't be caught. I managed to get a hand on one of them, and I hear there's quite a few out there. It would be a shame if they were to get back to the arbiters, who aren't quite keen on teaching us this knowledge.
And whoever gets those, their culture could get quite a boost from each one of them.
So no one ever brought me back one because as soon as people got them, they're like, this is powerful, and they just brought it to their culture. And like there was one that was supposed to summon enemy units on the overworld map. It was called Rite of Unrest. It was basically supposed to summon like bandits or undead or something to harry your enemies. And I think it was either the Rivlins? The Rivlins or someone was like, they were forming whole quests around it. And I saw people all over carrying them around, and I was like,
yeah, they were making these big
They're
plans.
everywhere.
Yeah. Some of them had like really powerful ones too, and they're like debating whether or not to use it on another culture, like their nuclear option. They're like, do we want to do this? We have to understand this is a big responsibility. And they're like getting together. Really fun gameplay.
So like I got really, really sick before the game. Like I was like bedbound in like 4 days before.
Yeah. She just looked like a tweaker. She's like, I was like, you need to lay back down.
So a lot of the stuff that I was working on either didn't get finished, or then we got to the game, and because of how difficult the whole setup was, we didn't get to implement it before the game was called early. But we made a lot of stuff for
We had quests for days.
We had quests for days.
Yeah.
Like we were gonna those scrolls that I put around, they were supposed to be the only ones in English. And I had a whole big scroll that was in a different language that me and Kit invented.
Yeah.
That they were able to they were able to try and find those rituals in the big scroll and try to translate the whole 45 rituals.
We invented a whole language just for this thing.
And also just because it was
It's 'cause
fun.
it's fun.
Like
No,
we were
it
going to
was
start a
fun.
black market. We were going to hire one culture to plant false orders in one culture, and then have another culture try to steal them, thinking they were actual orders.
Yeah,
thinking
start trouble.
Yeah. Like I wrote a whole book on lost Vatican clans that they could find like hidden lore information in.
Long story short, we went real overboard on what
I
could
think
have
we
been.
need to run our own game
I think
because like.
Even on the drives, we're constantly talking about like our own games and coming up with cool different ways we could run games. We're starting to itch real bad for it.
Yeah. But then throughout the game, some more like big story beats happen, which is the introduction of the Nightmare Queen and the undead. So there was a scene where someone was being executed and he just shouted, "Hail to the Nightmare Queen," before he was killed, and then he rose as an undead.
Yeah, they killed him and he's down on the ground and he starts rising.
And they're like, "Kill him again!"
Wait, he's getting up!
So they killed him again, and he just kept getting up, man,
Yeah.
until eventually he just wandered away, and they're all like terrified, like with pole arms following him.
Yeah, and eventually he came back again with like
a bunch of
undead. Yeah, really, really cool.
There was a lot of stuff going on. So like the different cultures were constantly heisting each other for the malice that we mentioned earlier, because it was really valuable, as well as like any sort of like loot they could find.
Yeah.
The orcs and undead kept attacking. The Vatican and the Suzak Mar, partially because of that attack on Divin Falls, their holy city, started really going at it against each other. The Hadrians revamped their entire government and elected like a player, like praetor, I believe it's called. And he, like, you saw him around, like giving speeches to, like, his name's Sev. He was like giving speeches to groups of Hadrian soldiers, and like he was pulling it off.
Yeah.
I like how in the cultures, player leadership is really starting to pull together. Like the Rivlins had the council, which are all players. They're not staff. And like the Hadrians have now their praetor, and he's been doing stuff the entire game. And they were creating quests. They were creating like that whole quest of planting information that he was part of was something that the council made up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the community in general is really impressive.
Yeah, if it wasn't for like weather stuff, like it would have been a real like solid time. I think we should probably get to the weather though. Like we touched on the weather.
But let's talk about the weather.
So there was a portion in which a storm started to roll in, and on the radio there was a warning that there is a tornado warning. It wasn't necessarily like one had touched down, but it was very possible that one could. So the staff, very smart, was like, everybody get into, there was like a barn kind of shelter there that we could go to. So,
if anything, just like it was near the basement, so they could have everyone at the same place.
Yeah. So, we're going in there and we're waiting and stuff, and I'm like, all right, the storm hadn't started yet. So I asked them, like, hey, can I just run to my tent? If we're gonna be here, we might as well maybe like keep it people calm, make a little party of it. Like I'll go grab some alcohol, we'll just like hang out here. And they're like, sure. So I run to the tent, I grab my stuff. I'm running back.
It's a less than 5 minute walk.
Yeah, I'm going back, and honestly, like, it's another 20 maybe 30 steps to get into the place. And the storm hit like a freaking punch. It went from like fairly dead, like barely a little breeze or whatever, to this breeze that came over. And there was this big, huge white like pavilion kind of tent or whatever where like tables were. That thing just, it left.
Flattened.
Like people were in it and they're like trying to hold on to it while it was friggin' falling down. Like I'm running with my booze. I'm like,
it was quite the wind. So that didn't last super long, but then when we got out, it was so strong. Like the staff tent was right next to our tent. There was another tent in the staff tent.
Yeah, no, it was incredible, and it was an interesting like experience because you're stuck in the space, and you know the storm is kind of raging, and the rain is coming down hard, and then we lose power. So the whole, you know, hundreds of players are in this one space sharing air. And kind of there's a tension. There's a little freak out because like tornado and bad storm and we're all stuck in here together.
Still like some people can't find other people.
Yeah, and the wind is like killing.
The staff though, again.
Yeah.
Like as soon as all that happened and as soon as like it hit so hard that some people didn't have time to get there, like they kept like you tried to leave to go find people. They're like, no. You're staying here. We have sent people to each individual camp and the spaces in between. If you go out and we don't know where you are, we're going to have to send more people to find you.
Yeah, no, they risked it immediately. They didn't even think about it. They're like, okay. And they left to go find people. Like, they were in the storm trying to make sure everybody was safe. Even if there was, like, a maybe someone might be somewhere, they're like,
no
we'll
hesitation.
Go. And you walk right out into the storm. We're like, the staff, man, super cool.
Yeah, so there was no tornadoes or anything. It was just awful.
Oh, point of pride. Somebody used the bag of the Wanderer as their tent, which, by the way, massive balls. This is the bag of the Wanderer. Check out that episode. Not a big tent. It's a thing that like becomes a backpack, right? That survived that storm. They're like, just so you know, I'm in the tent of the Wanderer, and like other tents around me blew away, and
like
that stayed
pavilion
standing.
tents blew away. Like it was like half the tents, and that's why they had to call the game. We hadn't even gotten to the point that there was like, actual tornadoes. They called the game because half of the people's tents were broken.
Yeah, it was a situation.
Just out of nowhere, so suddenly, like half of the game site is just broken.
Yeah. Tents flew into
They
other
had to
tents.
put the staff tent together because it had been like half ripped apart.
Yeah, it was quite the storm.
So then we decided that we were going to stay that night and leave the next morning to give ourselves to basically so we could help other people pack up and also like be there to help the next day.
Right.
So in the middle of the night.
So I'm sleeping hard because I was real tired.
Then Graham just got back from the bathroom, so he happens to be awake.
Yeah, and we're woken up to, I'm woken up to Graham first, being like, get up, we gotta go. And then I hear in the distance Joel, who's one of the staff
members,
going, find shelter, tornado!
Everyone get to the dragon den, which is where they had a shelter before.
Yeah.
So apparently 2 tornadoes had touched down within 10 minutes of us.
Yeah.
And Joel, like, special shout out to Joel on that night.
Absolute soldier.
He was running between all of those hills in the dark, in the pouring rain, when there were tornadoes about, like a simple whisper of the fact that there might be someone there, like running around the entire space, making sure everyone got back.
Yeah, well, kudos to you, bro. Like,
kudos to you.
The person you want, like when you're like, I have a list of people I want in an apocalypse situation. He made my list. During this trip, he made my list.
Yeah. It wasn't even that long that we had to sit and wait. The power went out, there was like storm whipping around, but it was that kind of waiting to see and just without hesitation. Again, like staff members were coordinating, they had radios the whole time. Joel is just like, he gets back covered in rain and someone else says there might be someone somewhere and he's immediately gone again.
Just into the storm. Man. Yeah, it was a night. Like we're just all huddled in place waiting, and the storm outside was bad. Like it was quite the thing going on. And we're just kind of like, I'm at the door watching the sky because I want to see the thing that might be coming.
The hail starts happening.
Like it was a storm. And we probably had to shelter in place for like an hour and a half or so, 2 hours. So it was late by the time we got back to the tent. And then it was just a nice
pleasant
smattering of
rain.
Also, shout out to White Duck Tents. All of our tents are White Duck tents.
None of them even flinched.
Yeah, no leaking in them at all. None of them got pulled up. Just good tents.
Yeah, you barely had to tighten the stakes the second day after the first big storm. Before we go too deep into...
Yeah, sponsorship, White Duck, sponsorship.
Yeah, the White Duck tents are...
They're what's up.
At least we have an experience with their bell tents.
The bell tents.
The bell tents.
They're not like perfectly in time. So like depending on your game, they might not allow them. But like, man. So yeah, that was an adventure. Like a real, like I think we were all talking to each other in there because there's very few people who stayed. Most
of
people
them got
left.
hotels and left.
There was like 20 of us who were still in
Which,
there.
by the way,
waiting.
still, staff managed to get everyone off that site with half a day to pack and everything.
Yeah.
Having to coordinate shuttles for people to go back and forth to their cars.
And made that call that might not have been with everybody a super popular call to end the game early. It was the right call. That storm was no joke.
Yeah, I think like 20 people died in the surrounding region where else it hit.
It was a legitimate problem, that storm.
Yeah.
So they didn't know that at the time. Like nobody knew that at the time. So like it was the correct call.
I think I remember hearing Liam, who's like one of the executive staff. He's like, as soon as I heard people say that they were scared or like that they felt like it was like they weren't safe, like there's no reason for people to stay.
Yeah.
But I think they even reached out to the surrounding hotels and managed to get like hotel blocks and like staff, man.
Yeah, again, like, yeah, if you want to be taken care of, this staff did really, really good.
This felt very much like a testing ground for new staff, and I can only imagine how great their games are going to be in the future, considering just how much they had thrown at them of stuff they couldn't control and how much they ate it for breakfast.
Yeah, and also still again, like the players too, like everybody who was there, this community, good job on you too. It was a real hard time. I mean, it sucked for us too, and we got to stay in one place basically as NPCs.
Yeah.
And you guys were running up hills in the rain, in the mud, and you guys made it like, what's up? There's a party one night and everybody's super high spirits and dancing. I'm like, I don't know how y'all
there was
dancing.
the masquerade. I sat in one spot and just entertained the people around me.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, that's basically our rundown. It was
like everything that a LARP is.
Yeah.
Including how bad it can get,
for sure.
Condensed into like 2 days.
Yeah, for sure. And I am excited. Like before the last one, we had some mixed reviews. I was iffy about coming back and stuff. I figured new management will give it a shot.
Yeah, and they definitely I want to go back.
Yeah, no hesitation. We'll go back to the next one as long as there isn't anything crazy with our lives. Definitely, they did such a good job.
I think that Reckoning is very much worth it. It's also worth it to get involved in the community beforehand because like they're constantly going the entire year in their Discord, especially in their like culture Discords, like building up their culture, building up their lore, building plans, and then they get there and they have like all these epic things planned and like what they're doing.
So I hope you liked this recap of our epic LARP experience, an actual epic experience.
Yeah, this is the closest we've come to like an actual real life adventure.
Yeah, it was a thing. Thank you for coming along the journey with us here. If you liked what we did here, you like things like this, leave it down in the comments section below, and also don't forget to like and subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime, though,
keep leveling up, you.
Hey, before you go, I have some announcements. I know, another wardrobe change. But all this news, it just keeps rolling in later and later. Anyways, our friends over at Bergsnyder has selected the first round winners for our Level Up LARP competition. And I wanted to announce them here on the show. First and foremost, congratulations to everybody who posted. If you're not on this list, you get a second chance because round 2 is already started. All right, so starting with our third place gift for a gift card of $25 at Bergsnyder. So I'm going to be saying all their character names online, so it's easier than doing their Discord name. Starting with our runner-up, Dante. Dante put together this amazing costume here using Bergsnyder gear, and the team over there was really impressed with just how cohesive everything came together. Now for our third place winner who gets a $25 gift certificate to Bergsnyder, we have Finian, the Ranger. Again, this kit looks amazing together, and not only did he do a good job making it practical for his character, but he also spent a lot of time in his backstory, and his creation reflects that. The judges were also really impressed at all the other, accoutrements he put together for his outfit to really bring it all together. Now for our second place prize and winner of a $50 gift card, we have our very own Grem. Again, the Bergsnyder folks really like the fact that all this came together to help tell his story. Being a rough mountain man, he kind of took things apart and roughly put it back together. And then also tried out a bunch of cool engraving techniques and stuff. And generally just did a really great job altering all these pieces to help tell his story. And now for our first prize winner who gets a $100 gift card and free tickets to the Conquest 2024 Skill Tree Camp. Congratulations to Adria, Daughter of Winter. The Bergsnyder team really liked the creativity of making this kind of badger cultist, the story behind it, the way they executed it into their costume, and just kind of the general creativity of bringing it all together. It came out super cool and we're really excited to see it in person. And that's it. Huge congratulations to all of our winners, not only for the amazing work you did, but for just like everybody in the community that was playing along. It was so much fun to watch you build your projects, to help each other. Really, really a cool experience. And for both those of you who are already playing and those of you who'd like to join, you have one more chance because level 2 of our Level Up LARP has just started. So if you're interested, make sure you check out the link in the description below for like the rules and how to get in on it. And again, congratulations to everybody who's played and to all our winners. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another great way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members and we couldn't do any of this without them. Special shout out to our newest high tier level Patreon member, Andrew Brockert. And of course, a super special shout out to our Grandmaster tier Patreon members, Yuri Santro, Dragon Designs, Froggy, and now welcoming Andrew Smith. Again, thank you all so much. It's amazing and honestly a bit humbling that you give to us. It really does make a giant difference in what we do here. If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you click on one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps out a lot too. Sometimes I don't know what to say at the end here, so I'm just gonna stare into your soul.